For more analysis, we're joined by the former Turkish diplomat, Dr. Cemal Sangu, live from Ankara. Dr. Sangu, welcome again to Asia One. Iran says the Strait of Hormuz will remain closed as long as the US pressure continues. Just how serious, though, is that threat?
First of all, good afternoon. Well, I believe this should be taken very seriously because the Strait of Hormuz is one of the world's most strategic maritime checkpoints. Around 1/5 of global oil and significant share of LNG export pass through these waterways. However, there is also an important distinction between political declarations and practical ability to sustain a prolonged closure. For Iran, Strait Hormuz represents one of its strongest strategic leverage points, but maintaining a complete closure would also carry sanctions, economic and diplomatic costs for Tehran itself, as well as for its regional partners. Therefore, while the threat is credible as a pressure, I think Iran is more likely to use control, disruption, and selective restrictions rather than seek an indefinite total blockade.
And sir, the Iranian media says a Qatari LNG vessel was allowed to pass while 2 oil tankers were turned back. What message is Tehran sending, though, through these actions?
Well, from my perspective, Iran appears to signaling that it wants to demonstrate to control rather than create complete maritime paralysis. Allowing a Qatari LNG vessel to pass the waterway while other commercial traffic faces restrictions suggest a calibrated approach. Tehran seems to be saying that it can distinguish between different categories of shipping and can decide who moves through strait and under what conditions. I think at the same time, by alleging that US military activity created unsafe navigation routes, Iran is attempting to shift responsibility for the disruptions on Washington. So this is not only a military signal, but also an important element of the information and diplomatic battle accompanying the current conflict and current crisis.
And the US has imposed fresh sanctions targeting Iran's oil trade and shadow fleet. So will these measures increase pressure on Iran or just further escalate the crisis?
Well, I think both outcomes are possible simultaneously. Economically, additional sanctions will undoubtedly increase pressure on Iran's energy exports and financial revenues. Washington's objective remains to limit Tehran's ability to finance its military capabilities and regional partners. However, sanctions do not work in isolation. When they are introduced during the period of military tension, Iran is likely to see them as part of a broader campaign of political, economic, and military pressure. That increases the risk of reciprocal action, particularly in sensitive maritime areas such as the Strait of Hormuz. Therefore, sanctions may strengthen economic pressure while also making diplomatic de-escalation more difficult in the short term, I believe.
And an Iranian lawmaker has called for the closure of the Strait of Hormuz. Could this become official policy, or is it mainly political messaging?
Well, at this stage, I will view such statements primarily as political messaging rather than confirmation of a formal state policy. In Iran's political system, members of parliaments do not determine military strategy. Decisions involving the Strait of Hormuz will ultimately rest with Iran's highest political and security leadership. Nevertheless, such political statements are important because they help shape public opinion and increase pressure during the negotiations. They also remind external actors that the opinion remains available if tensions continue to escalate. So I will not interpret the command comments as proof that a permanent closure has already been decided, but they certainly reflect a growing willingness to use the Strait of Hormuz as a strategic leverage.
And so, with rising military tensions, sanctions and disruptions to shipping, how do you see this crisis affecting regional stability and global energy markets in the coming weeks?
Well, I believe the coming weeks will be extremely important. If maritime disruptions remain limited and diplomatic communication channels stay open, energy markets may experience volatility without a prolonged supply crisis. However, if shipping disruptions expand or military incidents multiply, we could see higher insurance costs, increased freight rates, supply chain disruptions, and renewed upward pressure on global oil and LNG prices. From a geopolitical perspective, this crisis extends well beyond Iran and the United States. It directly affects Gulf energy producers, Asian importers, European energy security, and the broader stability of international maritime trade. Ultimately, I believe no regional actor will benefit from a prolonged confrontation in the Strait of Hormuz. The priority for all parties should be to prevent tactical military incidents from evolving into a broader regional conflict. Diplomacy at this stage remains the only sustainable path to protecting both regional security and global economic stability.
Cemal, thank you so much for your time.